But right now at 2:03, as mentioned, we are still trying to reach out to our guest, Landon Webb. His story has been top of mind. It's been, across this country. People now know of Landon's story. He was in a care facility in the Annapolis Valley at the time we first were connected with the story. His mother, Brenda, said that they were going to discharge him into the community without the adequate supports. Clearly, that makes sense. If you have someone in care and they are being released to the community and there is not the adequate support there, then it needs to be addressed. But this young man, this 25-year-old with children, took off. He ended up out in Edmonton working. And from there, he ended up coming back to Nova Scotia in contact with his parents. And for numerous reasons, he is now at Quest, the facility in Lower Sackville, where he is, in some respects, locked up, I guess is one way to put it. They schedule his appointments when he's allowed out for a smoke break, all of that. And for the most part, he is trying to fight the law that has stripped away his rights. So we're still trying Landon. In the interim, while we do so, Roch Longueépée is someone involved with the organization known as Restoring Dignity. And we reached out to Roch here this afternoon to get his thoughts. And Roch, thank you so much for being available to us this afternoon while we continue to try and reach out to Landon Webb this afternoon. You were able to
Thank you for having me on.
You were able to catch up a bit on his story?
So I want to just say when anybody talks about situations like this, one has to be very careful unless you know the intimate details of the individuals involved and the individual party that's involved in particular that we're all talking about, which is Landon. We have to be careful about that. But I want to just say to this situation that I think there's an awful lot of history here around Nova Scotia when they've had a long history of institutionalizing people, in particular children. But I want to read something to you that I think is very relevant to the subject that we're talking about here, and I think will give a lot of folks something to think about.
Okay.
And this is from a book on disabilities, for example, and it reads the following, and it says the medical model, and there's different models that we've used over the years to how we deal with people with disabilities, which I think is very discriminatory, and there's some of that element of that in all of this as well. And it reads from this recite from this book that, but the medical model of perceiving disability, while benevolent on the surface, is in reality insidious. Longmore, 1993, emphasized the following. I think it's obvious that this very definition of how people with disabilities should be regarded and dealt with by society presents us with an impossible dilemma, because being made over after the model of non-disabled people is exactly by definition what people with disabilities can never do, can never achieve. I think also this medical model displays a considerable degree of social ambivalence towards people with disabilities. In fact, the medical model in practice has much of the time been the institutionalized expression of anxieties in society about those who look and those who function differently. And that's a very important statement that he's just made there. In many respects, the rhetoric of the medical model has been paternalistic. Now, this word maternalism, since it comes from the root word for father, sounds benign, but in practice it often has been oppressive, because fundamentally this model of disability regards people with disabilities as repulsive, as incompetent to manage their own lives, and at times even as dangerous to society. Therefore, historically, in the modern era, they have needed to be supervised by professionals and various medical and social service fields, regulated by them, perhaps, throughout their lives. So I think that statement is very relevant to what we're talking about here. And we need to be very considerate of the fact that, this individual who is at the age of majority has rights himself. And I wonder whether or not he's been advised of his legal rights to legal representation. I don't know what the situation is on that.
Yeah, and
but I am concerned about the dilemma here.
The minister responsible, the justice minister here in Nova Scotia, has said that this legislation that has, in effect, stripped away this 25-year-old man's rights is probably due for review. That this legislation, which dates back to the 18th century, although the language was cleaned up several years ago.
I should intercept there for a second, Sheldon, and just mention that under Nova Scotia legislation, there is reference to best evidence-based practices when it comes to the mentally ill.
Okay.
That's in Nova Scotia legislation. They should be looking up. I don't even know why they're not reviewing that. They should be taking a looking at that as well. I'll have to find that in my notes, but I'll send that to you in that reference. But if you look up the Mental Health Act in Nova Scotia, you'll see that reference. So, again, that kind of contradicts what they're saying here as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, clearly, this story has there are layers, and mom and dad are concerned for his well-being. In fact, some of the reasoning or explanation that we were given is that they were afraid this young man would be traveling in the wrong circles or hanging out with the wrong people. And although on the outset, I mean, who would blame a parent for wanting the best for their kid? But on the other side, if you supersede their rights, in fact, if you strip away their rights. That's a different situation. That's a different story. We're talking about something completely different, are we not?
Well, you know what? I almost want to take a trip back memory lane and look at the case of the troubled teen from Cole Harbour, which my organization was working with. This was a black youth who had behavioral challenges, and there was this debate about how he should be best handled. The issue is that when he turns, the province, we had proposed a plan of action to the province, a plan of care for him to look at his issues, and the province played these rhetorical games all the way to the last minute when he reached the age of consent, which was 16, and then he got to decide what he wanted to do, and he went and did what he always did. So I don't know. There's a contradiction in this of sorts. The government seems to play whatever is they think, whichever way the wind is turning, and whichever way they seem to think is best. They seem to have done that historically. I'm not saying this government in particular, but often it's the bureaucracy, senior bureaucracy, that's making these decisions, not the political party that's in power per se, because the political parties in power often lean to the experience of the bureaucracy, the senior bureaucracy in those portfolios. So I don't know. I think the province is quite hypocritical on that aspect, because folks need to go back to the troubled teen from Cole Harbour file and look at what happened there. And I think that was a disaster. They really failed the boy. They failed the family. And again, we have a similar situation happening here by the sounds of it. Mm-hmm. And mind you, at the same time, I totally am supportive of families that are there to support their loved ones. But we also have to respect that this young man has rights himself. So he's right in articulating that. And I would hope that he gets the legal support and legal counsel that he deserves to articulate his rights and challenge that before the court of law, because that's his right. It's a right of any Canadian citizen, and it should be.
We've got on the line with us Roch Longueépée with Restoring Dignity, an advocacy agency here in the province. And I just wanted to touch base on something else. Someone else yesterday, when they found out, and we're still trying to reach Landon on the phone, and he's so far not answered several messages that we've left with him. Someone yesterday said, well, maybe you should ask this young man when you have him on the phone line about someone else that is in his life, that was in his life. There was actually a murder case in Nova Scotia involving a man by the name of Christopher Faulkner. During the testimony in that court case, the name of Landon Webb was part of the record because at the point of this case in the investigation, they found that Landon Webb's apparent girlfriend at the time, or he was described as an ex-boyfriend of a woman that was seeing this Christopher Faulkner. But in many ways, whatever relationships he may have, this young man is not, from what I can tell, broken the law. This young man has not, it's not guilt by association. There's no way that should be taken into account in this discussion of whether he has rights and freedoms.
Yeah, well, I think the dilemma really here is what I read to you in that text.
Yeah.
And it is the institutionalized expression of anxieties in society about those who look different or act or function differently. And that's part of it. It's a dilemma that many people, and look, the issue is as well in this country, and it's the reality everywhere in the world, the majority of people that are disabled are chronically unemployed, chronically being denied opportunities to better themselves. And it's tragic that we're here having to have this conversation, but that is part of this. I think that the public perception and attitude on disabilities must change, particularly on invisible disabilities, and particularly those that have mental health challenges, such as what's being purported about this young man. So, again, it's not any of our places to cast judgment on anyone, particularly this young man, but I think that he should be afforded the right to hear his case before the courts, and he should be given proper counsel to be able to present his case before the courts is right. And it doesn't sound like to me that has been presented to this young man, has it?
Not from what I can gather, and this is why there's right now a fight underway. He's trying to raise some money to actually challenge this, and as we've been saying, to be declared incompetent and to try to, from that position, assert your rights. That's a challenge. If the court's already,
I would encourage him. I would encourage him to reach out to the BC Civil Liberties Association in British Columbia. They do cases like this across the country, and this would be a case for them definitely to take a look at. And I mean, I don't have their numbers in front of me, but you can look them up, and I would encourage you as well to speak to the BC Civil Liberties Association, because they handle these kinds of cases all the time, and they would certainly be well versed on these issues as well. But again, it's hard for me to speak to this young man's case unless I know the more intimate details of what's going on with his family. I'm not casting judgments on either side, but it certainly sounds worrisome. I'm glad to see that at least there's a dialogue going on about this, but I also hope that he's okay. I certainly would want to make sure that he has the right supports in place as well.
Absolutely. Roch Longueépée, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I know we were hoping to have Landon himself. We're going to continue to try him throughout the afternoon, and we'll keep you in the loop, and we'll invite you back to keep your voice heard in this story as well. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Take care. All the best to you.
You too. Bye-bye. Roch Longueépée with the organization known as Restoring